I was born August 14th, 1979, to Johnny Ray Eisenhood and Diane June Eisenhood. When my father met my mother, he worked in Arizona as a mechanic and semi-professional drag racer. He and his team raced throughout Arizona, Texas, and Louisiana. My father was born to Leonard R. Eisenhood and Desi Pearl Eisenhood of Gilmer, Texas. Leonard, known to us as Grandpa Joe, and Desi had 4 other children together. Grandpa Leonard was born in 1912. Speaking to my great-aunt Joanne Bowen Eisenhood, I learned that her grandfather changed the family name in 1923 to a more Americanized version of the name Eisenhood. Americanizing names was understandable and common considering German Americans were persecuted during the First World War simply for being born of a name with German heritage. This was confused as German alliance. In 1917, anti-German sentiment began disrupting German American peoples and their culture began being stripped. President Woodrow Wilson issued 2 sets of regulation on April 6, 1917 and November 16, 1917, imposing restrictions on German-born male residents of the United States over the age of 14. The rules were written to include natives of Germany who had become citizens of countries other than the United States. All were classified as aliens. Some 250,000 people in that category were required to register at the local post office, to carry their registration card at all times, and to report any change of address or employment. The same regulations and registration requirements were imposed on females on April 18, 1918. Some 6,300 such aliens were arrested. Thousands were interrogated and investigated. A total of 2,048 were incarcerated for the remainder of the war in 2 camps, Fort Douglas, Utah, for those west of the Mississippi, and Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, for those east of the Mississippi. There was an additional temporary camp in Hot Springs, North Carolina. The fear of spies grew when Americans were warned to be watchful of their neighbors of German descent and to report any suspicious persons to the authorities. It was rumored the spies were poisoning food and that German Americans were secretly hoarding arms. The situation was only made worse by newspapers and government officials, both of which fed the public's paranoia. Many Americans started to look twice at their colleagues and neighbors. Patriotism and loyalty could only be proven by subscribing to loyalty loans, donating to the Red Cross, participating in parades, and joining the armed forces. Any form of dissent was considered pro-German and unpatriotic. German newspapers either shut down or switched to English. German language was banned in all schools, universities, and libraries. German societies, musical organizations, and theaters were shunned by American society. By March 1918, 38 out of 48 states had restricted or ended German language instructions in schools. People burned German books in the streets, literally destroying German Americans of their Germanic funds of knowledge. Thus began the language loss of many German American citizens. The public began to harass anyone who opposed the war, especially those of Germanic stock. German language services in churches were disrupted and German language newspapers were shut down. Churches housing German congregations were painted yellow. School children were forced to sign pledges in which they promised not to use any foreign language whatsoever. Citizens of German descent were dragged out of their homes at night and forced to kiss the flag or sing the national anthem. The most notorious case of mob action was the lynching of Robert Prager in Illinois in April 1918. Prager, a German native who had applied for American citizenship, was known to harbor socialist ideas and was suspected by his neighbors of stealing dynamite. Although this could not be proven, he was dragged out of town, stripped, and hanged. The lynching caused outrage among many prominent Americans. Nevertheless, court proceedings found the members of the mob not guilty. The First World War ended in November of 1918, yet the damage of language loss and destruction of many funds of knowledge for German American citizens had already been done. Many families, much like mine, changed their names after the war, not only to avoid persecution, but to attempt total assimilation into American society. The oppression they experienced at the hands of the country they were trying to love took a major toll on German American peoples, so much so that some of the internees at these camps chose to return back to Germany. In addition, during the First World War, the U.S. government seized over $500 million worth of property and monies previously held by German American citizens. It was clear that if German American citizens didn't accept total assimilation into United States culture, they would pay dearly. Unfortunately, even for those who chose total assimilation would experience the same treatment on a larger scale during World War II.